Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic. I get asked quite often if the $45 budget of build your own Precon decks is good enough to work in Commander, and well, of course they are. Just take a look at my newest brew from March of the Machines plus its aftermath, Active Aggression, a 5-color Precon featuring the new Tazri Stalwart Survivor. Tazri Stalwart Survivor is a 3-mana, 3/3 human warrior that's secretly a 5-color commander despite that mono-white casting cost. She reads, each creature you control has tap. Add 1 mana of any of this creature's colors. Spend this mana only to activate an ability of a creature. Activate only if this creature has another activated ability. Additionally, she has an activated ability of her own for WUBRG and tapping that mills you 5 cards and puts all creatures with activated abilities milled this way into your hand. And that right there gives us all we need to know about the theme of this brew. Every creature in the deck has some sort of activated ability. This way we can tap our creatures to make mana, to activate our creatures, to do everything from draw cards to deal damage to putting lands into play. With 33 creatures with activated abilities in the list, chances are this activated ability nets us 2 to 3 creatures every turn, every activation, which is amazing continued card advantage at this particular power level. But before we take a look at the cards in the deck, remember to hit all those good buttons. Like, subscribe, comment, and ring the bell to join the Brew Crew to never miss a new list. Naturally, one of the biggest challenges of a 5-color deck is the mana base, so let's tackle that right away. There's really no way around it, we're going to be using a lot of lands that enter the battlefield tapped. Anything that enters untapped and makes mana of multiple colors is expensive, and really prices us out of them unfortunately. Shock lands, bond lands, and even check lands are too pricey to include, even if they're just $1 each. So I've chosen to focus on gates. They aren't ideal, but each of the new gates lets us choose which color they produce, which is more helpful than the Ravnica gates that may not get us the colors we really want when we want them. Additionally, it lets us run lands like Heapgate and Gondgate and Baldur's Gate, which all provide additional new synergies for this saturation of this land type. We even have ways to tutor up gates with Open the Gates and Navigation Orb and Circuitous Route, giving us some added utility for finding colors we need even on this sub $50 budget. But our color producing doesn't stop there. We have several mana rocks that make all colors of mana. Relic of Legends, Decanter of Endless Water, and Corrupted Graphstone can make us any color we really want, and helps us get WUBRG when we want WUBRG. And I've found room in the budget to include the granddaddy of them all, Chromatic Lantern. You really need to be running it at this budget level to ensure you never have to worry about color production woes ever again. This is one big get on a budget, so make sure you make the most of it. Now, what about the creatures? There are 33 creatures in the deck, all of them having activated abilities, so naturally we want to synergize with that. Most importantly, we have Biomancer's Familiar and Zirda the Dawnwaker in the deck to help bring down the costs of a few of these abilities too. Massive boosts in synergy. And the deck's only Planeswalker is Tyvar Jubilant Brawler, not only letting us activate our creatures the moment they enter the battlefield, but also upticking to untap a creature of our choice for added activations. Very sweet. Especially when we are activating effects like Fauna Shaman to help tutor up other creatures, or Dynahair Invoker Adept to let us copy our activated abilities, or Ortheon Hero of Lavabrink to make us extra copies of our creatures. This could also be Zamone Quandrix Prodigy, getting us extra lands, Svella Ice Shaper making us mana rocks that make all colors of mana, or Incubation Druid just making us boatloads of mana on its own. We really run the gamut here, and all of the costs for these abilities, if they have them at all, are ones that our creatures can help pay for thanks to Tazri, which makes abilities that don't require tapping, like on Spectral Sailor, Captivating Crew, or Ant Queen, extra valuable, since they themselves can tap to pay mana for their own costs. This can net us a lot of value very consistently throughout the game. Doubly so if we have multiple creatures that can draw us cards over and over again. Triskaidekaphile, Fairy Formation, and Soul of Ravnica can each be drawing us multiple cards a turn, whether we use mana from lands and rocks to pay for it, or we use our creatures to pay for that mana. And with some pivotal creatures in the list like Biomancer's Familiar and Zirda, I want to make sure we have some ways to recur them too. Order of White Clay and Vat of Rebirth help us get these massive value engines back even if opponents keep removing them. And on the topic of Zirda, I've managed to build this brew in such a way that it is possible to use Zirda as a companion currently. We need to make sure that all permanent cards in our deck, from creatures to enchantments to lands, have activated abilities. While that may not be the case if you decide to do some upgrading, it is currently possible to have access to Zirda from the start of the game. Now, this wouldn't be a build-your-own Precon without the Pivot. And the potential other build-around commander in active aggression is Jegantha the Wellspring. While Jeggy here is a companion, we'd potentially be using her as the commander of the deck. A 5/5 elemental elk for 5 mana, Jegantha taps to add Wooburg, with the caveat that the mana cannot be used to pay for generic mana costs, only colored mana costs. So Jegantha would be able to help pay for the green of Scavenging Ooze, but not the generic mana of Cathar Commando, which doesn't hamper us much here. We want to be discounting our activation costs as much as possible, and we have enough pips of all 5 colors that we could easily be using this mana every turn. If we were to be using Jegantha as a commander, I'd recommend we use a few more untapping methods in the deck to get more out of these sweet activations. Penance Aura or Freed from the Real are both classics here, allowing us to essentially make infinite mana that can only be used to spend on colored mana costs. But if we reduce the costs of, say, Soul of Chandalar down to just red, with the combination of Biomancer's Familiar, Zirda the Dawnwaker, or maybe Training Grounds, recently reprinted, it would mean that we can just win the game. This pivot would require us to think a little bit more about how we would want to be playing the deck, and maybe require swapping some creatures with activated abilities that are just colorless out. But it is a way to brew it if you potentially want something a bit more combo-centric. Now that we've mentioned budget brews, how about the upgrade? If I were to add another $50 to this deck, where would I add it? And it's all about value here. I'd start by removing some of the lower value creatures here, like Viscera Seer and Cathar's Commando, for some equipment that double up on our activations. Illusionist Bracers and Battle Mage's Bracers both help us double up on non-mana abilities of our creatures. Not bad when that's anything from drawing a card to gaining control of a creature to doming opponents. I mentioned Training Grounds earlier, but there's also Heartstone, which could make a good addition. These two help further reduce the colorless mana costs of our activated abilities, which certainly helps further if we're using either potential commander. Remove Vampiric Rites and Silklash Spider for these two upgrades for some added oomph. And since our commander is milling us, why not add more recursion? Conduit of Worlds is just $5, but lets us play lands from our yard that we may have milled, and lets us cast permanent spells from our yard once per turn. Another great way to bring back pivotal activation cost reducers. Lastly are some ways to activate creatures more often. Magerite Stone, 1000-Year Elixir, and Samut, Voice of Dissent all let us activate our creatures either right away or untap them again to use them over and over. Fantastic utility in a deck full of abilities that may just require tapping to activate. Let me know what you think about this brew and what your favorite creature with an activated ability is. Did I include it in here? What would you include in your decks? Check out these other build your own Precon brews, and if you were inspired, you have to hit that subscribe button. Sorry, it's the law. And as always, folks, thanks for watching, good luck, and have fun.